I think there's going to be a big disparity between the hopes that these talks could engender among those who may be optimistic, and the fears that a lot of the opposition has that these dialogue talks are essentially dominated by those in power and those close to power, and will potentially result in a political arrangement that allows the current president Mohammed Dabi Kaka to kind of remain in power or to present himself as a candidate in the next election, which is currently allowed under the transitional arrangements. But given the so-called sovereign nature of the conference, it could, in theory, prevent those involved from becoming candidates in the next election. And that is one of the demands of some of the opposition groups, that those who are involved in organizing it, particularly the military committee that runs the country at the moment, cannot become candidates in the next election. But given their dominance of the state and the security apparatus, it seems unlikely that they're going to be willing to risk giving up the kind of power that a fully free and fair election would entail.
And in speaking about these rebel groups, two of the biggest rebel groups are not taking part. How big of a problem is that?
Well, in the short term, in kind of the military threat is somewhat limited. So the talks, which finished on August 8th, which resulted in a peace agreement of sorts with a number of different rebel groups, was in some ways a political success in that it essentially two of the largest rebel groups were brought on board. But most of the rebel groups involved in these discussions don't actually have a military force on the ground. But two of the rebel groups that didn't sign, the FACT and the CCMSR in the north of the country and in southern Libya, do. And the FACT, as you're aware, was the group that was responsible for the attack that ended up leading to the death of former President Idris Deby. So the fact they didn't sign poses a potential long-term threat to the stability of the country. But they had reasons for not signing that because the pre-dialogue didn't address any of their political concerns, whereas the other rebel groups were bought off in some ways by concessions relating to the release of prisoners or the integration of their units into the Chadian military, and restoration of property and a ceasefire.
I see. So, Deby has said the forum should open the way to free and democratic elections after 18 months of military rule. Do you think that will happen within that time span? We've seen delays to this dialogue already.
Well, the junta will certainly organize elections. The question is whether they're going to be free and fair, and they certainly won't happen within the 18 months. The 18 months ends, depending on how you count it. I think it ends in December. So it won't. There's no indication that the kind of processes you need to put in place to organize elections have actually happened yet, and those would have needed to start now. So I think there's an understanding among all parties that this transition process will be extended. Some people are kicking around the idea of April 2023. There will be elections. The question is, to what extent will they be freely and fairly contested by the opposition, particularly among political groups from the south of the country?
Well, so Chad is one of the world's poorest countries. It faces a series of political and military challenges. How consequential are these talks, or is this dialogue to everyday citizens in Chad?
Well, that's an open question. The opposition, most of the opposition that has not kind of gone along with the talks, claims that and that includes the armed groups and also civilian opposition groups, claims that the number of delegates involved is about 1,400 delegates or so. Of the 1,400 involved in the dialogue, about 1,200 are attached to the government in some way or the other. Of course, it's hard to really know what this means in practice, and there could be some real surprises in store for Idris Deby. But Mohammed Idris Deby, the son, and whether or not this could, it could be a political miscalculation on the part of the junta. It's conceivable that they end up losing a significant amount of power. But I think the general expectation among a lot of people is that this will result in some kind of at least cosmetic concessions to some of the opposition, perhaps more participation, particularly among Southerners within the government and the military. But the actual reins of power are still held by a small clique of people that are linked to the Presidential Guard and the family of Idris Deby Itno, and it's unlikely that they would be willing to sacrifice their own privileges and power and potentially open themselves up to the risk of prosecutions or other kinds of retaliation if they were to deliver too many concessions to the opposition. So I think that's going to constrain what these talks can actually deliver in the medium term. But I really hope I'm wrong.